Hey, what's up, everyone? We're back. Welcome to Well Talk. My name is Matthew Fernandez, and I am super excited to get into this new season, this next chapter, as we are back with Well Talk. And we're going to be talking about different topics that I think are not only relevant to today and what's going on, but also just different things that I think will help you all in helping yourselves and helping others. So, without further ado, let's get started into this next episode. As we're starting out, I just want to highlight a couple of things. Number one, there's so many different things going on in today's society, within the world, within our local communities. And just know that Worthwell stands with those who are experiencing oppression and injustices. And we stand for those who are dealing with things that are not only wrong, but also just trying to make a difference in their communities. We stand with those people as well, and we're advocating for it. And that, to me, is going to transition or help me transition into this topic of what I want to discuss today. And that is the three pillars of Worthwell, the three core beliefs, the foundational pieces as to what it means to truly invest in what is worthwhile, but also the groundwork, the foundational pieces of that is, or technically they are, number one, empathy. Number two, advocacy. And number three, emotional regulation. And if you think about it like this, it technically makes a W when you hold up a three. So it's the three pillars here: empathy, advocacy, and emotional regulation. These three pillars make all of the difference. And I think that when we are truly examining how we interact with people, how we relate to people, it's super important to think about the empathy factor. I mean, even in today's society with what's going on, if people would just exercise empathy, there would be a much different outcome. Empathy. Empathy is being able to understand or take on the perspective of another person. Now, if you think about that and let that sit, think about what that means and how so many different people and what's going on today would take on a different perspective if they were able to understand and take on the perspective or experience of another person. And one of the reasons why we don't empathize in a lot of ways is because it's exhausting, it's emotional work, it's heavy, and it means that we have to try to truly take on that person's perspective. And a lot of people don't want to do that because they are stuck or fixated in their one mindset. That's why, as you know, the mind stance is different because it gives you that ability to pivot and shift when necessary. I'm also hearing a lot of things now about people shifting and mindset shifts and things like that. It's interesting to hear that because that's essentially what the pivot was from the mind stance. And it's a heart posture, it's a centering of your mind, it's the foundational piece that you use in order to shift when necessary. And one of the ways that you do that is with empathy. You empathize with somebody, and then you take on that understanding or perspective. It's not about saying I understand, but it's about taking the perspective and trying to see things from their lens. Not saying I'm sorry, which is considered to be more sympathy. It's empathy, sharing in that experience. So if we would just do that on a daily basis, you'd see so much change because people would start to see, wait, hold on. Maybe I've been thinking, or maybe I've been viewing things from one lens and it's been skewing my perspective. And now that I take on your perspective and see how things come and happen to you from what you've experienced, I now feel what you have felt. Not in a exact way, but in the experience of sharing it and saying, wow, I never thought about it that way, or I have never experienced anything like that. And now as I think about it and sit with it, it's actually kind of heavy. Those experiences make the shift and the change. So that's the first one, empathy. The second one is advocacy. And in my opinion, you can't advocate for anybody unless you empathize with them first. If you want to utilize advocacy, you must first try to take on that person's perspective. Because what if you're advocating for somebody who has experienced something completely different from what you've experienced? That means that you have to what? Take on their perspective. And that's why you see a lot of people that do not advocate for certain types of situations and things that people are experiencing, whether it's injustices or oppression, because they don't take on that perspective. They stay locked in and fixated on their mindset and what they've been through, but they don't utilize empathy to get them to the advocacy stage. So advocacy, defending defending someone's rights, defending someone's perspective, defending someone as a human being, right? These are things that come from what? Empathy, being able to understand and take on the perspective of another person. So when we advocate, we're also empathizing. And then the last one is emotional regulation. Now, this one is key because if we would just learn how to emotionally regulate on a daily basis, you would see much less problems and conflict because people would stop and think before they act. So, my definition of emotional regulation is essentially stopping and thinking before you act. A lot of people have different definitions of that, but for me, it's more hold on, I want to react, but I'm going to breathe first, think about my actions and what would happen if I did this in this moment. And then if you feel a certain way, acknowledge that you have that emotion, but take it to a point where you're able to de escalate before you actually speak or act out. And this is something that a lot of people struggle with. I struggle with it, even being a therapist. Sometimes you just want to act without thinking. Sometimes you just do things because you're like, oops, that was impulsive of me. But if you can do it more times than not, and I mean, if you can emotionally regulate more times than not, you'll start to notice that your interactions, your relationships, your friendships will start to have a shift in the way that people not only respond to you, but how you respond to people. Remember, we cannot control how other people, what they say or what they do to us, but we can control what we say and how we respond to other people. That is crucial when you start to think about everyday life, whether it's the workplace, school, whether it's just your relationships, your friendships, family, whether it's something that has to do with politics and you're having a debate and you start just blurting stuff out because you're like, I don't have a filter, right? Well, speaking your mind, I'm all for being able to process things, but there's a difference between processing things and just blurting things out. Trust me, there's a big difference. And blurting things out means that you're not exercising empathy, you're not thinking about advocating for the person, and you're definitely not practicing emotional regulation. Because emotional regulation, to start, would simply say, hold on, let me think about this. This is probably going to come out wrong, and I'm not going to say it that way. I'm going to say it in a different way. And it's not about being just this overly sensitive person that walks on eggshells in every interaction. It's about being able to have just a smooth interaction with somebody, just avoiding conflict in certain situations where if you just didn't say something that maybe you felt like, oh, I got to just say this and let it out. Hold on, maybe there's a different way to say it. Maybe there's a different way of going about this. So when we think about these three pillars, we're talking about empathy, advocacy, and emotional regulation. These are the three pillars of Worthwell and the W. So if you start to think, hold on, I notice that I'm getting back in this old pattern of how I talk, how I think, and how I interact with others. I want you to just go empathy, advocacy, and emotional regulation. Think of those three things. Your fingers will help you, they will remind you. And go back to this episode to be able to refer to these things, how I broke them down, and how I'm going to continue to elaborate them even more or elaborate on them even more in the next episode. But as we're back with Well Talk, I'm super excited because we're going to be having some more guest speakers as well as different topics that I think are going to be really, really relative and applicable to not only your everyday life, but to also how you can help others while you help yourself. So stay tuned for that next episode. Continue to follow, like, share, subscribe. Thank y'all so much for your support. And we'll be back with episode 2 of this new season.